My name is Lila, and my story begins when I was 17 during my senior year of high school. The weight of my parents' expectations was a chain, binding me to a life I didn't want. I was not the daughter my parents envisioned. They had mapped out my life since I was little: excel in school, go to college, then get a stable office job. That was the dream they had woven for me, but it was a cage stifling my spirit, but it wasn't mine. I wasn't a straight-A student, but I wasn't lacking intelligence either. I had a creative mind and preferred working with my hands rather than sitting in class, listening to lectures that never interested me. Each lesson felt like a wall, blocking my true passions. I loved fixing things, crafting, and even decorating spaces. When I told my parents that I wanted to study interior design, my mother was nearly furious. Her anger was a storm, tearing through my dreams. She said it was a terrible choice, that it couldn't compare to a college degree. "You're throwing your future away," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "What can you do with a job that doesn't require a degree?" My mother would say repeatedly whenever I brought it up. "Why can't you be like the other kids in the neighborhood? Go to college, get a stable job. That kind of work will only lead you to failure." Her words were a whip, lashing at my confidence. Even though he worked tirelessly at the warehouse, he believed that college was the only path to success. His silence was louder than her shouts, a quiet disapproval that cut deeper. And I couldn't understand why he couldn't see that I wasn't happy doing what he wanted me to do. Their vision was a blueprint I couldn't follow, a life that suffocated me. I couldn't keep living in a place where every step I took was controlled by someone else's desires. So, in March, about 8 weeks before graduation, I decided to tell them that I'd been accepted into a short-term interior design course. It was my rebellion, a spark of hope I dared to ignite. It wasn't a university, but it was a path I truly wanted. I had earned a partial scholarship based on the projects I'd done. My portfolio was my pride, a testament to my talent they refused to see. When I said this, my mother's face immediately changed. She cried, not out of concern, but out of disappointment. Her tears were a weapon meant to guilt me into submission. My father couldn't hold back his anger and immediately shouted, "Do you know what an opportunity is? You're throwing away everything we've done for you. Don't embarrass us." His rage was a thunderclap, shaking the fragile ground I stood on. I tried to explain, but my words couldn't soothe them. Each plea was a stone sinking in their sea of disapproval. The feeling of helplessness rose inside me, and I said words I never thought I'd utter. "I can't live my life according to your dreams. I'm old enough to decide for myself." My voice was a blade, cutting through their control. Immediately, a tense silence fell over us. All three of us shouted, hurtful words flying back and forth. The air crackled with our fury, a storm of broken bonds, no one willing to back down. Finally, my father, his face full of rage, said, "If you don't want to do things our way, then leave. Don't ever come back." His ultimatum was a guillotine, severing our ties. I stood there, feeling everything shatter. A part of me wanted to retreat, but another part was too exhausted from the control. I was done being their puppet. I didn't want to live in their shadow anymore. I went upstairs, shoved the essentials into a bag, grabbed all the money I had saved, about $2,000, 0 cents, and headed downstairs. Each step was a declaration, a refusal to bend. My mother looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "You'll come back, right? You'll be back in a month, begging us to take you in." Her smirk was a taunt, predicting my defeat. She smirked as if I'd already lost the battle before it began. My father stood by the door, saying nothing, just glaring at me before slamming the door shut as I walked out. The slam was a final rejection, echoing in my heart. I stood there in the front yard of the house I grew up in, staring at the place that no longer felt like home, a stranger in the only world I'd known, not knowing where to go next. The rain started to pour, like a curtain falling on my past, like a sign of what was to come. I felt like a character in some depressing movie, but at that moment, I only knew one thing. I wasn't going back. This was my exodus, and I'd forged my own, had my own. I had made my decision. I'd chosen freedom, no matter the cost. After leaving the house, I felt like I was standing in the middle of a long road. not knowing where to go. The world stretched endlessly before me, a vast unknown I had to conquer alone. On the outside, I tried to appear strong, but inside the loneliness started to creep in. It was a cold shadow, whispering doubts I couldn't silence. For the first time in my life, I felt the reality of losing everything. No parents, no home, no safety net. I was unmoored, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. I remembered the arguments over dinner before I decided to leave. My parents had mapped out my life since I was little. They wanted me to go to college, get a stable office job, marry a nice man, and live according to the perfect plan they had laid out. Their plan was a prison, locking me away from my truth. They thought that as long as I followed their wishes, I would succeed and be happy. But their happiness was a lie, built on my sacrifice. But I wasn't happy. It was a nightmare for me. Each day was a battle, fighting to breathe under their expectations. I loved working with my hands, building things, fixing things, creating things. I wanted to be a skilled tradesperson, not a girl in a blazer sitting at a desk, listening to lectures that never interest me. My hands yearned to create, not conform. But they couldn't understand. Their blindness was a wall, blocking my dreams. Every time I mentioned my dream, my mother would look at me with disappointment, as if I just told her I wanted to drop out and become a garbage collector. Her gaze was a judgment, deeming me unworthy. "You'll regret it, Lila," my mother would always say. "We can't live our whole lives in a dead-end job. Think about it. Our whole family has worked so hard to give you this opportunity." Her words were a guilt trip, chaining me to their ambitions. "You can't ruin everything just because of some passing interest." She dismissed my passion as a whim, crushing my spirit. My father didn't say much, but his eyes were always filled with disapproval, as if he were disappointed that I wasn't the daughter he wanted. His silence was a verdict, sentencing me to invisibility. Every time I talked about trade school, he'd sigh and shake his head. "Is that really what you want to do? A regular worker? How do you think people will see you?" His question was a mirror, reflecting his shame in me. I used to feel guilty for not meeting their expectations, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. Their guilt was a trap, and I refused to stay ensnared. Once again, I decided to choose my own path. I told them I wanted to study interior design and that I'd been accepted into the program with a scholarship. It was my declaration of independence, a flag planted in defiance. And that's when everything changed. My mother started crying, not because she was worried about me, but because she felt let down. Her tears were a performance meant to manipulate me. She couldn't understand why I would choose a path without guarantees. "You're betraying us," she sobbed, as if my dreams were a personal attack. My father, after hearing my decision, slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "You're ruining your life, Lila. Do you understand that? We can't accept you becoming some low-level worker. You're making everything harder, not just for yourself, but for the entire family." His outburst was a volcano, erupting with years of pent-up frustration. Those words felt like a slap to my face. They burned, branding me as a failure in their eyes. I tried to explain that I wanted to do what I was passionate about, but every word I said only seemed to make them angrier. My pleas were sparks, ignored in their inferno. Finally, my father said the one thing that made it impossible for me to stay. "If you're not going to listen, you can leave right now." His words were a banishment, casting me out of their world. That was the moment I decided. I went up to my room, grabbed the bag of clothes I had packed long ago, stuffed a few belongings into it, and walked out without saying another word. Each item I packed was a rejection of their control, a step toward freedom. My mother called after me, saying I'd come back and apologize in a month, her voice dripping with smug certainty. But I didn't look back. I refused to give her the satisfaction of my defeat. I never wanted to see their disappointed faces again. I was old enough to make my own decisions. I was my own compass now, guiding myself to a new horizon. But things weren't as easy as I thought. In the first days after leaving home, I only had a place to stay because of my friend Zara. Her kindness was a lifeline, pulling me from the abyss of despair. Zara helped me in those initial days, but I couldn't stay there forever. Her couch was a temporary haven, but I needed my own ground. I had to fend for myself. find a job, and try to survive. Each day was a test, proving I could stand alone. I had to face countless challenges, from finding a place to stay to making enough money to get by. Every day felt like a battle, a war against the doubts they'd planted, but I never wanted to prove them right. I couldn't let my mother's and father's words become the truth. Their predictions were a curse I refused to fulfill. They thought I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. Each moment was a grind, testing my resolve. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. That certainty was my anchor, holding me steady. As I stepped outside, it felt like a part of my life had shattered. Standing in the rain, clutching the small bag of belongings I had hastily thrown together. The rain soaked my clothes, a baptism into my new reality. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened, but I knew I wouldn't. Her words were a challenge, one I'd meet with defiance. I couldn't keep living under their control and expectations. I was too exhausted. And I knew I deserved a life of my own, not one dictated by dreams that weren't mine. I deserved to be free, to be me. At that moment, I had nothing except the $2,000, 0 cents I had saved from part-time jobs. It was a fragile lifeline, all I had to face the unknown. It wasn't much, but at least it would keep me afloat for a couple of weeks. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't just stand there. I called Zara, the only friend I could rely on. Her voice was a beacon, guiding me through the storm, and thankfully, Zara let me stay for a few days. Even though it was just temporary, at least I had somewhere to escape the chaos inside me. Her home was a refuge, a brief respite from my turmoil. During those first days at Zara's place, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, a burden in my friend's home. I felt like a ghost, haunting a life I no longer belonged to. But Zara never judged me. Her acceptance was a gift, restoring my faith and kindness. He kept saying I'd figure things out as long as I stayed determined. "You're stronger than they know," she said, her voice a spark of encouragement. He helped me apply for emergency assistance because, technically, I was still a minor without family support, though I was eligible. That aid was a bridge, helping me cross the chasm of my new reality. Still, living on my own wasn't easy. I started working 2 jobs to make ends meet, one at a hardware store in the afternoons and another washing dishes at a diner on weekends. Each shift was a grind, a testament to my resolve. The long days wore me out both physically and mentally. My body ached, but my spirit fought on. Every night when I returned to the tiny rented room, I felt like I was living a life that no one understood. The room was a cell, but it was mine. Many times I wanted to give up and go back home to apologize and pretend to be the daughter they wanted. The temptation was a siren, luring me back to their control, but then I'd remember my mother's words. "You'll come crawling back in a month." Her taunt was a fire, fueling my defiance. I'd rather break than bend to their will. As time went by, my life gradually became more stable. Each small victory was a brick, building the foundation of my new life. I started earning enough to support myself, buying my own food and paying rent without relying on anyone. I also learned how to manage my money, cook for myself, and do things I never thought I could. These skills were my armor, protecting me from the world's harshness. Life wasn't easy, but at least I was moving forward. Each step was a triumph, a defiance of their doubts. One day, while working at the hardware store, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was my mother. Her name was a storm cloud, threatening my fragile peace. I swallowed hard, unsure of what she wanted. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it. I picked up. "Lila? Are you still alive out there?" Her voice was soft, but it carried a familiar edge of manipulation. "I'm fine," I replied curtly, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over me. My heart raced, bracing for her next demand. She sighed before saying, "Your father lost his job. We don't know what to do. Can you help us out a little?" Her request was a trap, pulling me back into their web. I didn't know how to respond. Hearing those words, I felt a hollow emptiness in my chest. After everything they did to me, now they wanted my help. Their audacity was a wound, reopening old scars, A part of me felt the urge to help because, after all, they were still my parents. But another part screamed in protest, refusing to be their savior. But another part of me was filled with resentment. They hadn't thought about me in so long, hadn't cared about my life. They only remembered me when they needed something. Their need was a chain trying to bind me again. "I can't help you, Mom. I'm taking care of myself now," I said firmly. My voice was steel, forged in months of struggle. "Lila, we're family," she pleaded, her tone dripping with false warmth. "And turn your back on us now. You turned your back on me first," I snapped, my anger breaking free. "You don't get to ask for help after throwing me out." My mother was silent for a moment. Then she simply said, "I understand, honey. I just want you to know that we still love you." Her words were a lie, a desperate attempt to guilt me. A surge of anger and disappointment rose inside me. I had fought so hard, working 2 jobs just to stand on my own feet while they lived comfortably under the roof they had chosen. Their comfort was built on my exile, a truth I couldn't ignore. All I wanted to do at that moment was hang up, to not hear another word. "I call you back," I said, then ended the call. But my resolve held firm. Conversations like that left me feeling drained, conflicted, and uncertain of what to do. But in the end, I had made my choice long ago. A choice to live for myself, not them. Those first few months, living on my own, I felt like I was walking down a dark, foggy road. The path was shrouded in doubt, but I kept moving forward. No family support, no one to share my struggles with. Everything weighed on my shoulders. The burden was heavy, but it was mine to carry. Each morning I woke up, exhausted, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I wouldn't know where to go next. Stopping was surrender, and I refused to yield. I worked 2 jobs, selling hardware in the afternoons and waitressing at a coffee shop on weekends. At first, the job at the hardware store was manageable. But once I added the cafe shifts, my life became a series of long, tiring days. Each day was a marathon, testing my endurance, while others my age were going to the movies, hanging out with friends, or spending time with family. I was alone in my tiny rented room, drowning in design course materials, dreaming of a future I still believed was possible. The room was my cocoon where I nurtured my dreams. Working hard wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the loneliness, the absence of conversations with family. The silence was a void, echoing my isolation. Sometimes when I saw pictures of my friends' families, I felt an indescribable emptiness. Their joy was a mirror, reflecting what I'd lost. I missed the family dinners, the meaningless arguments, my mother's constant scolding and my father's disappointed looks. Those moments, flawed as they were once my home. But now, all I had was myself. I was my own family, my own strength. No matter how much I loved them, I couldn't keep living in the cycle of control and expectations they had created for me. Their cycle was a prison, and I'd broken free. I had done everything to break free from their shadow, and now I couldn't go back. I couldn't let them dictate my life anymore. I was my own master, charting my own course. Life now felt like a never-ending battle. Each day was a skirmish, fought with grit and hope. I struggled through each day and night. Sometimes I felt completely exhausted. The exhaustion was a fog clouding my vision. But whenever I thought about my mother and the things she said, I pushed away the negative thought. Her voice was a ghost, but I banished it. I couldn't go back. No matter how tough it got, I wouldn't let them be right. Their predictions were a challenge, and I'd prove them wrong. I would prove to them that I could live well without their help sometimes. My life was my proof, a testament to my strength. I questioned if I was doing the right thing. Doubt was a shadow trailing my every step. But then I remembered how freeing it felt to walk out that door. That moment was my liberation, a memory I clung to. I couldn't keep living under their control, pretending to be the daughter they wanted me to be. Their expectations were a mask, and I'd torn it off. I wanted to live my own life, a life where I made my own choices and decisions, a life where I was Lila, not their shadow. On tired mornings when the sunlight peeked through the window of my tiny rented room, I remembered the dreams I once had. The light was a promise, illuminating my path. I wanted to become an interior designer, to work in a creative environment where I could fully express my skills. That dream was my North Star, guiding me through the darkness. Although I hadn't achieved it yet, I knew that every step, no matter how small, was still a step forward. Each effort was a brick, building my future. Day by day, I continued to work hard. I didn't have time to dwell on the past or what had happened. I focused on my work, my training, and the things I could control. Focus was my shield, guarding my heart, the sleepless nights spent completing assignments, the exhausting days spent searching for clients for small design projects. They were my crucible, forging my resilience. They all became an integral part of my life. One afternoon, as I was sitting in a coffee shop taking an order from a client, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother. "Are you okay? I miss you." Her words were a hook trying to reel me back from the first time in months I felt something inside me soften. A flicker of the love I'd buried, but I didn't reply right away. I knew I had to stay strong. If I answered, I feared I'd give in and go back to everything I had decided I couldn't accept. The fear was a warning, urging me to hold firm. I stared at the screen for a while, then put the phone down. My mother wouldn't understand, but I couldn't let myself be dragged backward. I'd fought too hard to retreat now. I was too tired of the constraints, the never-ending demands from my family. I needed to keep moving forward. No matter how difficult it was eventually, I picked up the phone and typed a short message. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm working and learning. I'll be okay." My reply was a boundary, a line drawn in the sand. Then I hit send and set the phone down. The act was a release, freeing me from her pull. I'd return as Lila, not their daughter, but my own woman. My life gradually changed after those exhausting months of working and feeling lonely. At first, all I felt was fatigue and emptiness. The days were a grind, but each one carved me into something stronger. But slowly, my perseverance began to pay off. Each small win was a spark, lighting my path. I vividly remember the sleepless nights when my eyes burned from a full day of working at the hardware store and the coffee shop. Those nights were my forge, shaping my resolve. But I couldn't afford to stop. Step by step, I started to realize that I had made it through the toughest days. Each survival was a victory, proof of my strength. It was time to start looking for a real opportunity. One day, while working at the hardware store, I ran into Mateo, the man who had helped me find some materials for a small project a few months back. His familiar face was a beacon, a sign of hope in my routine wreath. Then, he was just a regular customer. But now, he was the one who would completely change my life. He was a catalyst, igniting my future. He asked if I was interested in working on home repair and renovation projects. His offer was a door, opening to a world I'd dreamed of. It was an unbelievable opportunity. Mateo was a skilled tradesman who had been in the construction and repair business for years. His expertise was a map, guiding me toward my goals. He wasn't just a great mentor, but also a friend who was always willing to share his knowledge and experience. His friendship was a gift, filling the void my family left. He recognized my potential in design and decor and gave me the chance to work on more substantial projects. His belief in me was a mirror, reflecting my worth. The work not only paid better, but also allowed me to learn and grow in the field I was passionate about. Each project was a canvas, letting me paint my dreams. The first few days working with Mateo were a major turning point for me. They were a threshold, crossing into a new chapter. I didn't just learn new skills, I got to practice them on real projects. Each task was a lesson, building my confidence. Gradually, I became more confident in my work. I was no longer the confused, frightened young woman facing every challenge with uncertainty. I was Lila, bold and capable. Clients started complimenting me on my work. Their praise was a balm, healing wounds my parents had left. And for the first time, I felt valued. Something I hadn't felt in years. That value was a treasure, one I'd earned. Under Mateo's guidance, I didn't just improve my design skills. I also learned how to manage projects and communicate with clients. His mentorship was a ladder, lifting me higher. Slowly but surely, I began to get my own design contracts and life started to stabilize. Each contract was a milestone, marking my progress. I no longer had to worry about taking temporary jobs just to make ends meet. Financial stability was a freedom, releasing me from survival mode. Instead, I felt confident in the path I had chosen without needing my family or anyone else to support me. My path was my own, carved by my hands. A year later, after completing my training program and receiving my certification, my life was completely different. The certification was a crown, proof of my triumph. I had a steady job, a small but cozy apartment, and I no longer felt lonely. The apartment was my sanctuary, a space I'd built from nothing. The new friends I had met through work became like family. They were my chosen kin, filling the void of my past. They weren't just colleagues, they were the people who had been there for me during the hardest times. Their support was a foundation, holding me steady. I will never forget the moment I looked around my apartment for the first time. A space I had furnished and decorated entirely with the money I earned doing the work I loved. It was a masterpiece, crafted by my passion. It was a feeling that words couldn't describe. It was freedom, pure and untainted. I had built this life on my own without my parents' help, without living under their expectations or pressure. I was my own architect, designing my destiny. I felt free, in control, and ready to decide my own future. I was Lila, unbound and unstoppable. Then, one day, as I was working at home, my phone rang again. It was my mother. Her call was a storm, threatening my hard-won peace. This time, I wasn't sure what to expect. After a few seconds of hesitation, I decided to pick up. My heart braced for impact, unsure of her intent. "Lila, are you still out there, all alone?" Her voice was softer, but it carried a familiar, manipulative edge. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm working and doing well." My tone was guarded, a shield against her tactics. My mother was silent for a moment, then continued, her voice slightly hesitant. "We just want to know what you're doing and if there's anything we can do to help." Her offer was a lure, hiding her true motives. "You didn't care when I was starving," I said, my voice sharp with truth. "Why now?" "We're struggling, Lila," she admitted, her tone shifting to desperation. "Where Father's job loss hit us hard. We need you." I could sense a change in her tone. No more scolding, no more disappointment. But her words were a trap, pulling me back into their chaos. But I also knew they still couldn't fully understand my choices. I told my mother that I had found the work I loved and no longer needed their help. My refusal was a wall, protecting my new life. It was time for me to keep moving forward on my own. After hanging up, I sat there reflecting on the call. Maybe my parents still didn't truly understand me, but it no longer mattered. Their understanding was irrelevant. I'd found my truth. What mattered was that I had found my passion, my work, and the life I had always wanted. I no longer felt afraid when thinking about the future because I knew I could build everything on my own. My future was a canvas, and I held the brush. And I also realized that even if they never fully understood, I didn't need to prove anything to them. I was building my own life, and that was the most important thing. My life was my proof, a masterpiece of my own making. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast in my apartment, my phone suddenly rang. It was my mother. Her call was a shadow, darkening my morning light. My heart tightened. After all this time, she still hadn't genuinely asked how I was doing. She only reached out when she needed something. Her pattern was clear, a cycle of exploitation. I stared at the phone for a moment, then decided to pick up. "How are you, Lila?" My mother's voice was soft but distant, as if nothing had happened between us. Her tone was a mask, hiding her true intent. "I'm fine," I replied curtly, trying to keep my voice calm. My words were a shield, guarding my heart. There was a brief silence before she continued. "You know, your father still doesn't have a job and we're struggling. Can you help us a little?" Her request was a hook, trying to drag me back. A bitter feeling rose in my chest. After all these years, they had never really checked on me, never truly cared about my life. Their neglect was a wound, still raw, And now, when they needed money, they called with a sorrowful tone, as if everything had changed. Their sorrow was a performance staged for my guilt. I didn't respond right away. I remained silent for a moment. Then, trying to stay patient, I said, "I'm doing okay, but I can't help you financially. I'm taking care of myself now." My refusal was a fortress, unyielding. My mother didn't give up. She continued, her voice sounding a bit flustered. "I understand, honey, but, we're family. Family's supposed to help each other. I just want you to do your duty." Her words were a chain, trying to bind me to their will. "I always hoped you'd come back, but if you can't, at least help a little." Her plea was a manipulation, cloaked in familial duty. It felt like a slap in the face. Her audacity burned, igniting my anger. Their hypocrisy was a fire, fueling my resolve. I hung up without saying another word, feeling furious. The disconnection was a liberation, freeing me from their grasp. But I soon realized it wasn't over. Their reach extended beyond the call, a shadow that wouldn't fade. The next day, as I was scrolling through social media, I saw a post from my mother. My heart almost stopped when I read it. "Family is everything. No matter what, we must stick together through hard times. My daughter, Lila, has become independent, but the family still needs her. We miss her so much and hope she understands and helps us during this difficult time." The post was a public shaming, a calculated move to guilt me. Reading those words felt like being cornered, forced to respond. The way my mother used social media to apply pressure on me made me feel exploited. Her manipulation was a net trying to ensnare me. She knew I was following her, knew I'd see the post, and she hoped I'd feel guilty enough to come back and help. Those words weren't genuine concern, they were a performance designed to trap me. They were just a way to make me feel obligated to return, bringing with me the compassion I once had for my family. Her tactic was a betrayal, twisting love into duty. But I was too tired of these games. I couldn't let myself be pulled back into such manipulation. I'd fought too hard to be free. The next day, my mother called again. I didn't pick up. Her persistence was a siege, but I held my ground. Instead, I typed a brief message. "Mom, I know you need help, but I can't come back. I can't keep living the life you chose for me. I'm independent now and I need to keep moving forward." My message was a declaration, a line I wouldn't cross. After hitting send, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The relief was a breeze, clearing the storm within. I no longer felt the pressure to live up to anyone else's expectations. I was free, unshackled from their demands. But soon the calls started coming in from my siblings and other family members. Their voices were a chorus, echoing her manipulation. They all asked about my mother's post, trying to convince me to help. One day I received a text from my brother saying that Mom had cried because of her post and begged me to come back. His words were a guilt trip, but I saw through the act. But I wasn't swayed. I had come too far to start over, and I couldn't abandon it. I had built my life from nothing, and I couldn't let the guilt and old expectations pull me back. Their guilt was a shadow, but I walked in light. I decided not to respond anymore. Silence was my shield, protecting my peace. My life was no longer tied to what they wanted me to be. I had built an independent life, and I would continue down the path I had chosen. My path was my truth, and I defended it. A month after deciding not to return, my life had begun to stabilize. Stability was a gift, earned through sweat and tears. I had landed a good job at a major interior design firm, and gradually I could support myself without worrying about money. The job was my canvas, letting me paint my passion. I had my own apartment, good friends, and a job I truly loved. My apartment was my kingdom, built by my hand. Finally, I felt like I was on the path I wanted. A path that wasn't shaped by anyone else's expectation. It was my path, carved by my choices. But then one day my mother called again. This time her tone was different. There was no blame or request for financial help. Just a somber, concerned voice. "Lila, we've made mistakes," she said, her voice trembling with rare vulnerability. "Can we talk? Just once. "I now, Mom?" I asked, my voice wary but curious. "What's changed?" "We've lost you," Lila said. "We need to talk," she said, her voice slightly choked. "Your father and we've thought a lot about what happened. We know we were wrong in how we treated you. We don't want you to feel pushed away from the family anymore. Can you meet with us just once?" Her plea was a crack in their armor, a chance for redemption. I didn't respond immediately. My emotions were all over the place. Doubt and hope warred within me, a battle of heart and mind. After all these years, they had finally acknowledged their mistakes. But could I forgive them and open up to them again? Could I trust the family that had broken me? After all this time, I had learned how to stand on my own. And now, I didn't want anyone coming back to control my life. I took a deep breath and replied, "Okay, Mom, but only if you and Dad agree to one condition. I won't help if you don't respect my boundaries. I can't go back to living like we did before." My condition was a fortress, unyielding. There was a brief silence before my mother said, "We will respect that, Lila. We're willing to change." Her promise was a fragile bridge, one I'd test carefully. The meeting took place the following weekend. I met my parents at a quiet cafe. The setting was neutral, a space where I could stand my ground. They sat there looking at me with faces that were no longer stern but rather anxious and uncertain. Their uncertainty was new, a sign of their vulnerability. My mother gently took my hand as I sat down, and my father just looked at me, waiting for me to say something. "We know we were wrong," my mother began. "To me all our expectations on you and never let you make your own choices. We're truly sorry. Your father and I understand now that you've grown up and don't need us to decide for you anymore. But we're still family, and we want to start over." Her apology was a seed planted in the ruins of our past. I looked into my mother's eyes. Those words weren't new to me, but this time I sensed a sincerity in her voice. Her sincerity was a flicker, a hope I dared to entertain. Forgiving wasn't easy, but I knew that if I didn't give them this chance, I'd never be able to move forward. Forgiveness was a step, not for them, but for me. "I forgive you, Mom and Dad," I said softly but firmly. "But if we're going to start over, I need you to respect my life and my choices." My words were a contract, binding them to change. "I'm independent now, and I don't want to be controlled or pressured anymore. My boundaries were my shield, protecting my freedom." My father nodded. "We will respect that, Lila. We want you to feel free, and we're ready to change." His agreement was a promise, one I'd hold him to. So after that meeting, I decided to help them once. I paid to help them keep their house. It was a gesture, not of duty, but of closure. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the only way to help them without feeling overwhelmed by unrealistic expectations. It was my choice, made on my terms. However, I made it clear that they had to change, that they needed to attend family therapy sessions where we could openly express our feelings without feeling judged. Therapy was my condition, a path to healing. My parents agreed. And from that point on, our family dynamics began to shift. The shift was slow, a fragile rebuilding of trust. They attended therapy, worked on improving relationships, and learned to respect each other's boundaries. Each session was a step, mending what was broken. It was a long and challenging process, but small improvements began to show. They no longer tried to control me, and I no longer felt trapped by their expectations. The freedom was a gift, one I'd fought for. For me, the most important thing was that I hadn't returned to living under their control. I had built a stable, fulfilling life that I had chosen. My life was my masterpiece, crafted by my hand. I could work in the field I loved, live freely, and do what I wanted without fear of judgment. My work was my passion, my freedom, my reward. Even though my family had changed, I remained committed to living life on my terms, no longer allowing anyone to decide for me. I was Lila, sovereign of my destiny. Our relationship couldn't go back to how it was, but at least I had managed to build a life I was proud of. Pride was my crown, earned through struggle. Each day I felt stronger, not just because I had survived the tough times, but because I had dared to live authentically. Authenticity was my victory, a life true to me. Now I have built a stable, independent, and fulfilling life. While my relationship with my family has seen some improvements, I still maintain the boundaries I set. Those boundaries are my fortress, guarding my peace. I've learned how to stand on my own 2 feet and not let anyone, even my family, dictate my life. I am my own ruler, unbowed and free. Through this journey, I've realized that perseverance and living true to oneself are the keys to building a meaningful and free life. Perseverance was my sword, authenticity my shield. What do you think of Lila's journey? What would you do if you were in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to hear more stories about family life and positive changes. Lila's story is a beacon, inspiring us to forge our own path. Lila's journey shows the pain of breaking free from others' expectations, yet it glows with the triumph of living authentically. Many know the sting of being molded into someone else's vision, yet still fight to be themselves. Your struggles, like hers, are real and powerful. If you've defied control or carved your own path, you're not alone. Share your story below or with someone you trust. Your voice can inspire others to stand tall. Let's create a community where empathy fuels courage, where we honor our truths. What's your journey? Speak it. We're listening.